international trade.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I would like to thank my colleague from Nanaimo, Ladysmith, for his advocacy on human rights and democracy, and assure him that this government, too, strongly believes that trade policy must represent the values and interests of Canadians. Indeed, our values must not only drive our domestic policy, but it must also drive our international policy. And let me be clear about what those values are. We believe that the economy and the environment can and must go hand in hand, and that is why we are investing so heavily in a green economic recovery. We also believe in an inclusive approach to trade that seeks to ensure that the benefits of trade are more widely shared, for example, with traditionally underrepresented groups such as women, Indigenous peoples, LGBTQ2 communities, all of which lead and can lead very successful small businesses. I find it curious that the member raised the FIPA agreement with China, since, as he well noted, this FIPA agreement was pushed for and signed by the Conservative government under Stephen Harper, not the current Liberal government. The free trade agreements that our government has signed affirms parties' commitments to respect the values and principles of democracy and to protect and promote human rights and fundamental freedoms identified in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In addition, the agreements that we have signed include provisions relating to workers' rights, corporate social responsibility, and anti-corruption, all of which contribute to supporting human rights more broadly, Madam Speaker. Labor provisions in our free trade agreements, including, for example, the new NAFTA, seek to improve working conditions and protect and enhance basic workers' rights. Environmental protections and provisions in our trade agreements, such as the agreement with our European partners under CETA, seek to commit our trading partners to maintaining high levels of environmental protection and set out obligations to foster good environmental governance and the enforcement of environmental regulations. As I've outlined, Madam Speaker, the trade agreements that this government has signed support Canadian businesses while including some of the most progressive provisions possible. L'objectif, Madame la Présidente, est de faire en sorte qu'un plus grand nombre de Canadiens ainsi que nos pays partenaires bénéficient d'un commerce et d'investissement accru en incluant des dispositions sur les droits de travail, la protection de l'environnement, l'égalité des genres et les peuples autochtones. Cette approche globale et inclusive est aujourd'hui plus importante que jamais. Et nous cherchons à mieux reconstruire comme pays, mais aussi comme monde international, multilatéral, après la COVID-19, Madame la Présidente. Merci.
Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Parliamentary Secretary for her response. Indeed, the Canada-China FIPA was a conservative agreement. It was a terrible agreement, and we need to get investor-state dispute settlements out of every agreement that we have around the world. There have been calls in Parliament for party leaders calling on us to sign a trade agreement with India. But what about the Prime Minister Modi's campaign to disenfranchise 195 million Muslims in that country? What about the oppressive and anti-democratic actions taken by the Indian central government in Kashmir and the jailing of journalists? Canada must take democracy, human rights, and the environment into consideration when deepening trade relations with other countries. We must hold ourselves and our trade partners to a higher standard. Let's work towards an international system of trade that we are proud to leave our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I'm happy to agree with my colleague from Nanaimo, Ladysmith, and I would note for him that, of course, Canada will continue to pursue an inclusive approach to trade with new partners, and that approach will be informed by engagement not only with Canadian stakeholders, but also by conducting various analyses, for example, gender-based analyses, environmental analyses, and, of course, consultation with First Nations. I would also note for my colleague, Madam Speaker, that closer bilateral ties with countries, including economic ties, are a very effective way of promoting Canadian values and interests, such as human rights, labour standards, and, of course, environmental protection. Thank you, Madam Speaker.